Okay. So David, we're going to probably do the same thing as we did before, where you'll pull it up and we'll just do next slide.
Yeah, I have the slide.
So I did want to comment. Yep. I did want to go to talk to you about. You touched briefly about the cost. I apologize. I just caught about the last 20 or 25 minutes of your talk. But I heard that you gave some financial numbers. That is one thing that I didn't want to address in this talk, and the reason being is I am from Nashville. There's 3 other private groups in town, and then there's of course Vanderbilt, and then there's a very large national perfusion and healthcare corporation that's based just 7 miles south of us. And so within just the city itself, I would say there's at least 5 different avenues to buy capital equipment and disposables. With group pricing, whether you're a national perfusion or healthcare company, or you're a healthcare system across the country, or you're a big level 1 medical center, or you're associated as a perfusion group with the purchasing power of a hospital, or you're standalone. There's a lot of different ways that pricing gets done within capital equipment and disposables, and the combination bulk pricing. A lot of different ways that they make packages for people individually. So I didn't want to go down that route. I'm glad you touched on it, but that's one thing I did not touch on. This was the cost of these products, because I just don't think it's a very accurate. I think one person's cost can be much higher or much lower than what some people are going to find out there. So that's kind of I guess what I wanted to preclude first. That's right.
It's called what's that called when you what's that? You're the financial guy. What's it called when you agree on a price? The market value, fair market value. Fair market value. Fair market value is
Capitalism.
fair market value is what you can get somebody to pay for something. That's fair market value. There's no such. It sounds like such a neat term. It's fair market value. That's just what you agree to buy it for. It's kind of a crazy term.
All right. Well, we'll just jump right in. So next slide.
Oh, I'm the slide guy here.
So additionally, I wanted to say that I don't have any financial disclosures to any of these companies I'm talking about today. I just wanted to lay that out there right away so nobody got any ideas that I'm pushing one or the other. So next slide. And, what we're going to do is we're going to talk about, primarily we're just going to talk about the pumps, and we're going to talk primarily touch on a little bit of the oxygenators that have some affiliation with some of the manufacturers here. But if you just click next slide, I'm essentially going to eliminate everything else but these 3 topics. And so we'll get right into it. Next slide.
Next slide. I did it. Oh, next one after this? Mm-hmm. Okay, hold on.
Yeah, sorry about that, Joe.
Okay, I'm trying to make it change. Oh. Okay. There, is that it? Nope. There. Okay, right there. There you go.
So essentially, and I did want to bring to the table on this discussion that there are 2 or 3 different companies out there that are not FDA approved. Some are available for compassionate utilization, and then there's some that are actually trying to get compassion utilization, and then there's even one that's available just as a fixed trial. That's a couple of the centers across the country, but these are primarily the devices that are going to be available in the U.S. I would think within the next 3 to 5 years. Many of them are already available, of course, but there are a couple that are coming down the pipeline. They're going to be here really, really soon. Additionally, a couple of these companies also have some devices that I would think within the next 6 to 12 months, I think we're going to get a couple more products from some of these companies, primarily Abbott. I think Medtronic is going to have another component, and I believe Sorin will also have another oxygenator and or pump available here the next year. But I just wanted to give a brief overview of what the world, what the world is seeing in form of an ECMO standpoint. And we know in the U.S. we come a little bit behind the the bell curve with this technology because of our FDA and the regulations it takes. But I did want to give an overview of what's available worldwide. Next slide. So we'll jump right in. I did this by alphabetical order. We've got everybody's pretty. You talked about the CenterMag, Joe. Everybody's very familiar with this. This technology has been out there for years for the perfusion community. They've got first generation, and now they've moved on to the second generation consoles. The first generation is up in that upper left-hand corner. The second generation is the upper right-hand corner, and then they've got a monitor that they've added on that is a little more user-friendly touch screen. The thing that is most unique about this device is that it is completely frictionless. The magnetically levitated impeller allows one of the few technologies that is truly frictionless and is a floating impeller. And as far as from an ECMO standpoint, what I don't like about this is that there is no backup on the backup hand crank available. So when you're transporting, you always have to have two consoles with you, because if a primary console goes bad, whatever the malfunction is, electrical, mechanical, with it in that console, there's nothing you can do other than to change the console out. The lower left-hand corner shows you've got the two primary consoles up top. You've got a backup down below for that's more or less a BIVAD situation. And then the lower right-hand corner, that's their transporter device. You can see you've got it's really, really nice. I would say it's probably right behind the cardio hub, which we'll talk about later, as far as transporting the circuit. It's got a wonderful setup to where the console's protected. It sets up nicely. It's got a couple wing arms on it that can lock it to the bed on a handrail, or it can actually be held. It's not that heavy. It's about 22 pounds. It's got it's all inclusive. It's got your oxygen bottle tank, as you can see on the left. The console slides right in to a slot in the middle, and then you've got your oxygenator and your heat exchanger on the right-hand side. It straps in. It's designed primarily for either a Maquet Quadrox, or you can get one of the Affinity oxygenators. It's got multiple different straps and more or less holding devices for the oxygenator. It's a great inter and intra facility portable ECMO device, and the only, like I said, the only downside to this is it does not back up hand crank. And I said I wasn't going to talk about cost. I wasn't going to talk about exact cost, but the pump head is quite expensive, as we all know.
Does it have
next slide,
Matt? Does it have a backup battery pack to it?
It does have a back, so it's got an internal battery that the first generation is 60 minutes, and the second generation is 120 minutes, and that's each in the primary console. Additionally, they do have, as as technology's grown, we all have those battery packs for our phones or for our computers. Mm-hmm. They do have approved external battery packs that can extend your portability range without draining the entire internal battery. So there is a way you can actually put a external battery pack on it, and it's not necessarily an Abbott Thoratec product, but they do have approved battery packs that go along with it that you can purchase extra if you need to make an extensive trip without some sort of an inverter in an ambulance or an airplane. You can get longer than the 120-minute internal battery life on the second generation.
Okay.
Next slide. And please, let's. This is a discussion. This is not a lecture. So if we've got anything from the panel, please stop me at any time. So and primarily, the CenterMag, it can also be a VA. It's the VA or a VV ECMO system. Either one is capable of doing this. The Hemalung by A-Lung. This device, I believe, is going to be probably the next device that gets FDA approved in the U.S. They did a 30 hospital. They're actually doing a 30 hospital trial that was announced just late last year. It's the VEN-AVOID trial. This is strictly for ECOR, which is a form of VV ECMO. It's not designed for oxygenation. You do get a little bit of a component of oxygenation with it, but its primary role is to take off CO2 in the COPD patients or post lung transplants that's having trouble, or pre lung transplants that are awaiting transplantation. It removes between 25 and 50% of your basal metabolic CO2. The cartridge inside of it, it's kind of almost looks like a cell saver. I want to call it an oxygenator. They call it a respiratory dialysis cartridge, but for all intents and purposes, it is an oxygenator. It just doesn't oxygenate as well as it should if you compare it to the other ones. It stands stationary in the device, and the cartridge inside spins. That's what gets your more or less. And there's just a constant blood in, blood out of a single pass, and the cartridge just spins within it. It's been used, multiple different places across Europe and Asia. And they did one of the largest studies of this is in the UK, and it really eliminates the surface area on this device. It's very low impact, and because of it's almost like a CRT machine. You don't have to anticoagulate fully. It's a very unique kind of a niche product for your CO2 retainers. No hand cranks available. The intra-facility mobility, you can do it intra-facility, but not extra-facility because it does have a very short battery life, and it's just, you can see in the picture, it's kind of a large piece of equipment that just not going to transport very easily if you have to go from facility to facility. Mm-hmm. Next slide. So this is the flagship of the worldwide ECMO transport as we know it. It's the CardioHelp from McKay. Additionally, the Rotaflow, which was their first generation pump, they upgraded them from the HL20. Both technologies use the Rotaflow pump. It is a single point bearing. It is magnetically driven like all the other devices, but that design has not been changed since the HL20 came out. It does have a hand crank for both devices. The CardioHelp, of course, like I said, it's the flagship. It's probably the platinum standard when it comes to ECMO transport across the world. Once again, to your point, Joe, when you talked about it, it does come with a hefty price tag, and has a 90-minute battery life. It's very compact. Allows you to whether it's a helicopter, ambulance, fixed wing, and then once you get into your hospital, or if you're staying within the hospital, they have added this cart. It's very convenient, very low footprint size. And the only downside about this is when it comes to the CardioHelp, and anything that needs to be changed out, whether it's the pump head, the oxygenator, even a line, you have to change out. It's an integrated system, so I would say that's the drawback on that system. It's a one and done. One and done, yeah. Next slide.
Exactly. Well, that too, and I was going to add to that for a program that is just using the doing ECMO, but is not going to be transporting their ECMOs via either air or some other means, but they're going to actually be keeping them. And if anybody's going to take the patient or they're going to transport it, they're coming to get the patient with a helicopter. It's a great transport ECMO. I will give them that. There's no question about it. But I don't really feel like that's appropriate for just the standard ECMO program. I think it's overkill. No pun intended.
I would agree with that. The upfront cost, and what the Mulcahy people are going to say as well. What they're trying to do is they're also trying to, we're going to talk about that a little bit later on tonight. But the staffing issue, because of the bells and whistles and the safety features, and they are designing, they've designed that mechanism to not have a perfusionist be bedside with it,
right,
and potentially even in house.
Right.
They're offsetting the cost of an expensive FTE in house, and trying to eliminate that, because we all know perfusionists don't grow on trees. They're a high commodity as well. And so these smaller programs that, what they're trying to do is you don't necessarily have to have a perfusionist in house. You don't necessarily have to have a perfusionist potentially, do anything but change it out. And there's some, depends on what kind of program you're running. We're going to talk about that later. Is that, it's trying to make it, it's perfusion, it's ECMO for dummies, if you will. And they're trying to make it very simple. And that's not a derogatory say when I say for dummies. They're trying to make it simple, trying to make it safe, and they're trying to utilize the least amount of resources when it comes to man hours, physical man labor or person labor involved with it.
Well, and that's a very, very good point. In fact, I'm glad you brought that up, and I'm glad you don't mind me talking. But I think that in terms of the physical operation of the device, you can turn it on. The physician wants it at 4.5 liters. You can turn it on 4.5 liters and make it run as the nurse at the bedside. But when the patient's unstable and the thing starts to chatter, and is it the pressure? Is it and not getting that stable? Is it the pressure? Is it volume? Is it both? Is there something else going on? Managing that, I think the nurse at the bedside needs to take care of the patient. And I think either the perfusionist or the nurse ECMO specialist needs to take care of the ECMO. It's a team effort, because as long as it runs smoothly, no matter how simple you make the system still has to be potentially adjusted. You need to be and know what to do in the circumstance as it's occurring in order to make the thing continue to run, especially if you have a patient with low anticoagulation and all of a sudden your line starts to jug and you get a tissue that's now trapped within the cannula. Does the nurse at the bedside who's now managing a code know to turn the flow all the way down to zero, let it release, and then slowly bring it back up again? So eventually they figure that out, but they're managing the patient, but it took them too long, and now the whole thing is thrombosed, and you still have the same problem. But that's okay, because you can still spend a lot of money and get the next Cardio Health cartridge and stick it in there, and everybody's happy. Okay, next slide.
Yep. And so this is another investigational device. It's not FDA approved yet. They have used this in a couple patients within the U.S. for compassionate use. You can do VA and VV and ECMO with this configuration. It's primarily the Metos Delta Stream pump combined with the Nova Lung oxygenators or ECOR respiratory dialysis more or less devices. And you can see the platform. It looks a lot like the Rotaflow as far as the footprint of the Delta Stream pump, and it looks a lot like all the other devices that we have, whether it be the Biomedicus or the Sorin. It's a remote head that you have. But what is most interesting to me is that they have more or less designed, the Novolung team has designed multiple different oxygenator-like products to more or less give you customizable what you need. They even have for small adults, they have them for peds, they have them for large. If you need oxygenation and CO2 removal, they also have it if you just need CO2 removal. And once again, kind of like the ECOR machine with the A-lung, the hemolung that we saw before. The far lower right-hand product, that's a pumpless system. What they do is they have an arterial graft that is sewn onto the femoral artery, and they more or less put a graft on a femoral vein or cannula, and it utilizes the patient's blood pressure to actively pump across that membrane for ECOR. Mm-hmm. It's it works very well.
Very low resistance through that thing.
Very low resistance, and once again, these are your primarily what they're using them for are people that are either not transplant eligible but go into some sort of a hypercarbic scenario that they just need to get the patient back in line in their blood gas management, or these people that are on lung transplant lists that they don't necessarily want to throw the entire ECMO circuit at them. These can be easily managed. Very low anticoagulation on the pumpless, and then the middle does have the small pump with it. That is primarily for if you have to need more than just a pump less. If you need or you sort of a cardiac portion that it really your cardiac function may be a little bit compromised, and then of course to the left that's the full component of the XL lung kit. That is the equivalent of the Maquet Quadrox or any of the other mainstream ECMO-like oxygenators that we have in the U.S. But I really look for this company to be a lot like the Tandem Life, or we're going to talk about a little later. They have adopted this where it's not one size fits all. It's kind of like appropriate, very similar to what Terumo did with their ECMO, with their oxygenator sizing.
Yeah, the Capiox.
They did. It's one prescription thing.
Yeah, prescriptive. They call it prescriptive. Oh, we lost Matt. Hold on, Matt. We lost you. Hold on. Oh. Wait, you lost your voice.
There, you're back.
Say again. Say something. Okay, yeah, you're back.
Yeah, it's a lot like what Terumo did with their prescriptive oxygenation.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So next slide. So this is the other, besides Medtronic and Maquet, this is the other company that's pretty mainstream out there. LivaNova Soren SCPC trolley. And then most recently, LivaNova has purchased the Tandem Life, Tandem Lung product line from Cardiac Assist. Cardiac Assist had the Tandem Heart for quite some time. A lot of places in perfusion communities were used to this. LivaNova recently bought it. That has the VA, VV ECMO platforms. I'm going to start with the Tandem Life and the Tandem Lung. The problem with the Tandem Life, Tandem Lung product line is that it is a one-stop shop. You get the cannula, the pump, and the oxygenator all included in one kit. There is no a la carte, and it is a significant cost for opening that kit.
$18,000.
Yep.
And they won't sell the cannula separate. But in Canada, they can buy the cannula separate for $11,000.
Mm-hmm. Really? I did not know that.
Yep. So go to Canada Medical online and buy the cannula separate. No, I'm just kidding. Try it.
But as far as a portability, it's got a 60-minute battery backup once you unplug from direct power. Once again, it is magnetically driven with a floating impeller. Similar to the Centromag. However, there is the lubrication port that's underneath that is required for that. IV pole mounted controller, and they've recently come up with this patient vest, and the portability for this is outstanding. It really is. You're able to walk the patient. It is second. It is second to none. The portability, inter, or just letting the patient walk out into a courtyard outside. It's very, very, very convenient. It's no different. All you have to do literally is take an IV pole and an oxygen tank. It's no different than if a patient had an IV and was on some sort of nasal cannula requirement.
Now, can I ask you this? It has no heat exchanger, right? It has no heat exchanger.
It has no heat exchanger. That's correct.
Now, I've also heard that it's a little bit underpowered. So if you had a patient, let's say, who was in septic shock and had SVO2 of 45, maybe 40, 45, are you going to be able to get enough power out of this thing to treat that patient? Or is it more for patients who can be ambulated that just need primarily CO2 removal with some oxygenation?
Well, it's funny that you mentioned that, because you would think LivaNova, the Sorin product line, you're thinking, well, why would LivaNova want to go ahead and purchase this? Because it's kind of a it's kind of a competing product. But because what you just touched on is exactly why they purchase it, right? So the Sorin SPC and the trolley, if you need the workhorse to provide for a septic patient or someone that truly needs ECMO, meaning that they just don't need a little bit of support, they are not your pre-transplant or just them limp off or limp into a surgery. That's why I think LivaNova purchased it, is because you're exactly right, Joe. This does not have the horsepower to maintain, nor does it have the heat exchanger that you're going to need for long-term support.
But I think they bought it for the cannula.
Well, it's a market. It's right. It's the market as well, because they've got it. It is a and the functionality of actually with using the old tandem heart catheter that you actually goes across the septum,
right,
to where you're utilizing the patient more or less as an it's an LV device at that point. That's the other the other diamond in the rough for that company.
Yes, absolutely.
So moving on to the Sorin SPC with the trolley kit, we have a homegrown system that we actually use as a transporting device. The design, it isn't bad. It's the handles on the main pump or the main driver itself, also the same size as what the quick clamps are. So you're able to get the remote driver head and the control panel all on one device, and you can take it. You don't get the ERC, the bubble detector. You can get with you. It doesn't need a freestanding holder for you. But the whole idea, will it work in a transport? Yes. Is it as convenient as some of the other product lines? The Cardio Help, the Centromag? No. But it also doesn't come with their price tags either.
Right.
So to your point, these centers that just need to provide the support, and they're going to hold on to them. They're not going to transfer them, to a different place. They're going to wait for somebody else to come get them. This would be my recommendation to get your, as far as a platform off the ground. This would be my choice of product to start your program, because once again, there's many things that come into your program. We're going to talk about that later, whether it be staffing, a physician champion, referral base, volumes, census, a lot of things. A lot of people want to open ECMO programs. I mean, it was very lucrative until a couple of months ago, as we talked about in an earlier session.
But I think
there's a lot of things.
I think that's going to change,
that.
though, Matt. I think they're going to up adjust that.
Yep. Yeah. But to the point is, there's a lot of different variables that go with starting an ECMO program, and capital equipment costs, is not insignificant. And so, starting a program, this isn't the worst platform you could go with.
Yeah, I agree with you, and you're absolutely right about that. You brought up some really good points. Having a physician champion, having the right referrals, having the patients referred for ECMO before they become so damaged with barotrauma from the ventilator, or so poorly perfused that their periphery is already necrotic from all the pressors, and nobody's done anything up to this point. And basically taking a salvage now and trying to do something with them. But, you're right. Everybody wants to start an ECMO program. But starting an ECMO program means all of those things we just mentioned, plus people that have actually spent the time to learn how to manage the patient on ECMO. Because just putting them on ECMO and walking away and hoping that everything turns out okay doesn't ever turn out well. You have to actually take care of the patient.
Yeah, I would agree that the cannulation process, although it is important, because if you have a poor cannulation or you have a cannulation, error or an obstacle, you're going to deal with that throughout the entire run of the ECMO. The patient's ECMO run, but cannulating is probably the easiest thing of doing anything with an ECMO patient. It's the management strategy is the most difficult.
Absolutely. And knowing how to. Exactly. Okay, so let's see. Next slide.
Yep.
Okay.
Next slide. Oh, there was one other thing I would like. No, we'll go next slide. Sorry. So the BioConsole, this is the Medtronic. They had the 540, the 550, and now this is the 560 here in this picture. Hand crank available. Once again, the design of the head very similar to the Rotaflow and the Sorin Revolution. It is not a truly frictionless surface. It has a ceramic bearing in it. What is very interesting about Medtronic is they have decided to enter the market and more or less they don't care what device you want to buy. They have retrofitted an adapter plate to go to the other manufacturers' consoles, so you can use their disposable. And so I think that's a pretty what I would say forward-thinking type engineering strategy, because the capital equipment cost once you purchase it, a lot of these times you're tied in to the manufacturer that you've bought the capital equipment with. Medtronic has gone a little bit beyond that. You may have already made a decision to go with a different company, but that doesn't mean that you can't use us on our disposables. And I think that's really, really novel.
I agree.
And like I said, this is probably the most. I think most people in perfusion have seen the BioConsole. Doesn't matter what model it was, but this console hasn't really changed that much in the last 20 years.
20? I remember it from 1979.
But, I didn't want to date you, Joe.
Thanks. You were right there. You taught me.
And so the final slide. So the overall, I just wanted to go through the last column is my own personal opinion. I haven't transported. I can honestly say I haven't transported the A-lung. I've not transported of course, the Delta Stream. But everything else I have transported, and that's kind of my star ratings. The higher the star rating, the easier it is to transport, whether it be inter facility or intra facility. The cardio help and the tandem life and the tandem lung, they're the easiest to transport. And then the Thoratec Centromag, it's a little cumbersome, but it's right there. And then finally, your Sorin SPC and the Rotaflow and the Biomedicus, they're all in the same category. And I just more or less reviewed the summary of what our previous slides were into one-stop shopping on what we covered today.
Okay, very good. And let's see. Oh, that was it. That was your last slide. Okay, very good. So So
Yes,
that was good. I enjoyed that. So you wanna discuss this at all? Anybody wants to call in? They can call in. You can open the phone lines real quick, or maybe a few minutes, and then we could make a 2-minute break. How much time do you need on staffing model?
Oh, well, that's the funny thing. I think the presentation isn't that long, but I think the discussion can get lengthy because I think there's some highlights of some of the tenants that some of the pitfalls that we've seen here at Vanderbilt of the different staffing models that we've tried. So as far as the presentation, probably 15, 20 minutes on the presentation, but I think you could talk for hours on that subject.
Well, let's do this. If it's okay with everybody on the panel, if it's okay with you, you want to take